are more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Welcome back to Sense of Beer Style, everyone. Welcome back, Julia.
Howdy.
Today, we're going to talk about, we are in the category of American Wild Ale. And it's not necessarily American, it's just we Americans took influence of other beers and made our variations of it. So that's why the category is named American Wild Ale. It's not suggesting that we're making, wild ale from only American beers. But we're talking about the subcategory of mixed fermentation sour beer. Now, mixed fermentation is somewhat different from spontaneous fermentation. Let's talk about that first, Julia. And a simple way of thinking this is spontaneous is purely wild yeast and bacteria, whereas mixed fermentation is we've taken that wild yeast and bacteria and kind of controlled it so that we can get what we want out of it. Imagine going out into the wilderness and finding a wild group of horses, and there they are. We're just going to take a picture of them, and then if you're a rancher, you're going to try and corral these wild horses into your ranch and put them in a fence, and then maybe see what you can do and work with them. Maybe take them to the rodeo for the bronco riding thing. That would be mixed fermentation. That makes sense. The difference between wild, spontaneous, and mixed fermentation, where we do have control over what we're putting in and somewhat control of what we're getting out. So think of mixed fermentation in those terms. But what are we talking about with this beer? With this subcategory, we're talking about any base style of beer. Some are more common than others, but we're talking about any base style. But we're going to take that base style and we're going to make it sour and funky. That's what mixed fermentation does. So let's talk about wrap our head around some ingredients when we start talking about this kind of beer.
Right. And ingredients, we often bring up process too. And based on what results you're after, your process will vary, right? Cellaring and aging these once they're bottled or kegged at warmer temperatures, fermenting at warmer temperatures. There's a whole approach there based on what you're after and what you're trying to coax out. But the characteristic ingredients and virtually any style is what the style guidelines obviously allow. Is really more about the fermentable, the microorganisms, the fermentation agents, we shall say. And so these mixed fermentation sour beers, part of American Wild Ale, are going to allow for and have commonly lactobacillus, pediococcus, Saccharomyces yeast, which has many, many variants, or Brettanomyces, which has many variants as another type of yeast. These styles also ingredient-wise and process-wise can be blended, right? Or straight up. So they could be friendship beers where you're blending from one barrel to another, where you're blending from one stainless to another, but they don't have to be. And wood, by the way, or barrel influence, right, would be common, but not a requirement as well. So that's really an important aspect. But you don't want anything really as the dominant flavor as much as the fermentation agents will be the star, the shining Hollywood leading hero star of this beer, and then everything else behind the scenes supports.
Yeah. When we get to appearance, this is going to be easy. It's dependent on the base style. Just because it's mixed fermentation, it's not going to give you any clue just by looking at it. So it could, it could be clear, it could be hazy, it could have a wonderful head retention, it could be poor. It really is dependent on the base style. So don't hang your hat on any appearance. Just look at it, notice what attributes it's showing you, and then move on. And more importantly, get into aroma.
And so aroma, how do you know you're drinking a mixed fermentation sour beer? Well, you have to have some forgiveness, right? Because it's a spectrum of how intense, aggressive, or mild the microbes and the fermentation agents would be, but they should be noticeable, right? You want them getting towards stronger and more dominant to give you those aspects of, as I said, Pediococcus, Lactobacillus, Saccharomyces and its variants, Brettanomyces and its variants. So you got to know what you're looking for. So aroma-wise, those should get to your nasal passages first. And then you're going to want it to be palatable. You're not going to want it to be negative, a train wreck. You want it to be, even though it's funky and out there and wild, not wild, let's take that word out of it, and creative expression of what microbes can do, you want it to be inviting. That's a key component. So that's an easy high level of the aroma and pretty much exactly what the style guidelines would say. But you're not looking for one specific thing because there's so many options with mixed fermentation sour approach.
When we get into flavor, honestly, I'm not aware of any brewer who brews a beer in order to win a Guinness World Record and just sales be damned. That's most of the brewers, the vast majority of brewers, if they're going to brew something like this exciting, this eccentric, this wonderful, it's still got to sell. How do you sell a beer? By making it so good that people want a second. And so, how do we want a second? We want it to be harmonious. We want it to work together. We want it to be interesting and tasty and enjoyable. So, when we talk about the flavor, who knows? It's dependent on the base style, the mixed fermentation, the Saccharomyces, Brettanomyces, the pedio, the lacto. It's all going to have its say and exert its influence over this final product, much like members in a band are going to influence the music. This could be anything, it could be everything. But if you're judging this category, the subcategory, good versions of this are going to make you want another one. That's all I can really tell you about flavor because it's so much variability here. Any tidbits you want to share with flavor or getting into mouthfeel?
Well, I like how you described it, and I feel like I kind of queued it up on the aroma. So I
Yeah,
think we've got everybody's heads in the game. And if you are drinking one of these mixed fermentation sour beers while we are talking about this, you'll get why the style guidelines need to be so kind of loose. Because if you were to pick one mixed ferment beer out of your cellar compared to another, you're going to just have such variety. Unless it's the
yeah.
same beer and the same brand, you're not going to be able to have them describable the same way twice. It just won't. It's just not. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find it challenging when I'm sitting at the judges table and we're judging Brett mixed fermentation beers. It's like you can't really compare them to each other. So you really just have to hone into how harmonious is this one sample, good, medium, not good. Okay, move it in its category, and then trying to figure out. But they're not going to taste the same. They're not going to have the same base beer. It's a fool's errand to try and say, well, it should be like each other. No, they should not. So
Yeah,
when we get it,
and I
sorry, go
brought
ahead.
up no problem, and I brought up the word palatable earlier when I was
Yeah,
talking about aroma, which technically isn't
yeah,
exact because palatable means on the tongue and soft palate, but hopefully you got the gist. There's these beers are divisive, right? My version of my favorite, if Jeremy and I were to do a 8 beer mixed ferment sour beer session, he might love 2 of them over 8 and I might love 6 over the other 2, right? Like it's so personal. So I do think the point, and Jeremy's leading us to that is this is about likability, balance, harmony from a variety of influences, including the base fermentables, but most importantly, the microorganisms and anything else that's added like the oak or wood. So that I think kind of really brings it home, and that's why mouthfeel is varies based on style. You will be looking for these though because when you get beyond Saccharomyces, ale and lager yeast, you're going to start to realize how lacto, Brettanomyces, Pediococcus really take things further and advance sugars, and you get mostly more of a drier beer. So these are often drier. if you're looking to taste these against the base style. So that's a really good tip. And then the carbonation, it's not an enforcement, right? So you shouldn't, if you were judging this in a BJCP competition, for example, it doesn't have to have carbonation, but it might, right? So that's one to look for, but don't expect it to have to have. So those are the two mouthfeel components that I would at least bring to the table.
Yeah. So when we try to compare this to different styles, again, that's another fool's errand. So let's start with the base style. Let's just say, for example, we're going to compare this to an American blonde ale. And then we have beer number 2 is an American blonde ale that has mixed fermentation in it, for example. Well, there will be a lot of similarities because of the ingredients and probably the process, but that the mixed fermentation one is going to have such a character that's going to lead you down into sourness, balsamic notes, funky Brettanomyces character, clean yogurt-like lemony acidity from lacto, and by the time that's all done, has been aged and done its thing, it may look nothing, or you may experience nothing like the original base style of a blonde ale. So keep that in mind, that when you mix this fermentation all together, even if it's even if you know the base style, I don't have very good advice for you. Just take it as it is. Is it enjoyable? Yes or no? And then try and find out why. So that's our style comparison. Do you have any good commercial examples you want to share with us?
Yeah, and the style guidelines do a good job of kind of naming some of the ones that you can continually still mostly find today,
Yeah.
albeit mostly American brewers. So I'd love to see the guidelines go beyond that. Jeremy, you always bring up Love Children, so it's so funny because mixed
Yep.
fermentation sour beer. If you need one in your back pocket, just remember that kind of love child thing. So Boulevard Love Child. Super fun one to cellar, big, amazing, popular beer that in the has definitely a following, and one to covet and go for. Jester King, this was one of my first. Le Petit Prince. I mean, I remember getting served that.
Yep.
Jolly
So good.
Pumpkin, Oro de Calabaza. I mean, come on. This is such a great beer to find and covet and have and actually drink and taste and have you get that strata, that dance, that interplay of multiple, fermentation agents kind of dancing together. Lost Abbey Ghosts in the Forest. Frankly, I've never had it, but Lost Abbey continues to deliver. New Belgium Le Terroir, which has kind of
Yeah,
been a
that's fantastic.
mainstay.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And then Russian River definitely more than dabbles in this space. They lead in it. And Russian River Temptation is one of the biggest kind of mainstay beers that just sticks around and people are always seeking out to find it. So some really good, beautiful examples in the guidelines to have named.
Yeah. And so let's just tap our foot on the base of vital stats. I don't have any vital stats to share with you because this is not a style in and of itself. This is a variant of a style. So if you were to compare this to the base style stats, one thing that you might notice is that the final gravity may be different than its base style, but for the most part, all the stats are going to line up according to the base style. So we're gonna move on from vital stats. There's not much to share with you. This is just more of like a variation on what we're doing. So let's talk about the glass and tent that you would use, Julia.
Yeah, so I really love smaller, more bulbous glasses that are going to give a small taste. I'm holding one up actually from Purpose Brewing, who's definitely a leader in this space. They're out of Fort Collins. Peter Buchart and Freezy Buchart, formerly of New Belgium. Great
Yep.
little sweet brewery.
I got to judge beer with Freezy. She was wonderful.
Yeah, and you feel like when you go to the brewery, you are walking into a little slice of kind of Europe, old world, in the new world parking lot area that they have. And
Yeah.
Peter and Freezy are leading the way. So a glass that has a stem and that is going to give me the allowable chance to kind of have volatiles express out of the glass. That's my suggestion. Temperature, I mean, start refrigerator cold, just simple, easy, and let it warm up. The trick, if you're not drinking a 750, because those are big, you might, if you have small 375 milliliters, take out 2, drink one, and then the other one's warming up after you've taken it out. I always talk about that trick. And then just pour a few little sips at a time, and then I like to refresh. I think these are worthy of that splash in the glass, kind of agitating, kind of, really getting the beer to mix around each time. So smaller amounts in a open glass with a stem and a foot is what I would go for.
Yeah. Um, you know, what I really need to taste this beer first because there's so much variability. I need to know what this beer is going to share with me before I decide what I want to eat with it. But just generically speaking, because these beers tend to be sour, they tend to be funky. I love beers like that. Those beers really lend themselves a little bit more to wine-like beers. And when I think of wine-like beers, I really love grilled steak and chimichurri sauce, or even like a risotto or a paella dish that really take that funkiness and adds to that flavor, takes that acidity in contrast with this fatty and savory meal. It's just wonderful. And I remember once judging this beer style, and there's a beer that came out and it tasted, I mean, the flavor profile just reminded me of Thai coconut stew in a beer. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever tasted, and it was wonderful. I think I drank the whole sample when we were done judging. It was fantastic. So you can take these flavors and play with them, like, adding to like a pad thai, or just think about what it is that's giving you, and what can you compare and contrast with it, and what's really going to bring out those flavors to their best advantage. But what advice do you have, Julia?
Well, I like where you go, and I kind of just find myself following and not having an agenda of what to say, because it is all about tapping into what each of these has potential synergies. I always say half the pairing battle is intensity,
Yeah.
right? You don't want it to be barreled away, washed away, negated. So I think that's something. And I mean, these microorganisms bring to the table, like, anything with kind of a certain titratable acidity, or certain pH or sourness, that brings intensity to the table. My mouth's even watering thinking about that, right? And so they can stand up to bigger, richer, fattier, salty foods because you've got some acidity there. So I would lean in that direction. And then again, it depends on the malts, depends on the base style. So I'm going to say, take these beers to Thanksgiving dinner, go crazy, try them with each side, try a whole glass with every bite on your plate. Put them with Brussels sprouts, go crazy, right? Wine falls apart, Brussels sprouts, put it with asparagus. These beers might just go great with those out of the box green vegetables that are bitter, that are vegetal, right? They might be a clash, though. You don't know. Depends on which style and base style. So play, have fun, and that's my best advice, is just be open-minded.
Yeah. So enjoy your mixed fermentation. It has a lot to say. So listen, enjoy, and see you next time. Cheers.
Be well, everybody.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.